Hello, I am Peter Okwache. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. A measure of relief for tourists, businesses and ordinary South Africans as the country opens its borders to travellers from across the continent for the first time since March.
When he eventually announced, it was a good feeling because we eventually could plan. I knew that, okay, on such and such a date, I'm able to go back home.
As Nigeria celebrates the 60th anniversary of its independence from Britain, we speak to a man who was the country's first ever cabinet minister about that time and where his country is today. Also on the program, New York's Little Africa. We take a stroll through the streets of Harlem to find out how entrepreneurs are bringing a flavor of Africa to the Big Apple. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Across Africa, countries are beginning to ease border restrictions on travellers put in place to try to curb the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. South Africa and Uganda are the latest to reopen their borders. In a moment, we'll hear from Uganda. But first, South Africa says it will now allow visitors from all African countries in, but has retained restrictions against countries with higher coronavirus infection, including the UK, the US and Russia. The country has been Africa's worst hit when it comes to confirmed COVID-19 cases, with 674,000 cases, about half the number reported on the continent. The BBC's Nomsama Seku reports from Johannesburg.
After 6 months of a strict lockdown, South Africa has finally reopened its borders. 18 international flights will be making their way here to OR Tambo Airport today. South Africa's tourism minister says the reopening of borders is a step in the right direction to revitalizing the tourism industry.
We are very excited because this is a key milestone. As you know, that COVID-19 pandemic has really done a blow in terms of global economy and global tourism. So this, we see it as our first, as another step for us towards recovery, especially because international markets are contributing positively towards our growth in terms of economy.
But not everyone will be allowed in. The South African government says those who will be allowed in will only come from countries that have been classified as low risk in terms of coronavirus infections. While leisure travelers who come from the UK, America, Brazil and many other countries who still have high infection rates are still banned from coming in. The reopening of international borders has been welcomed by many travelers.
I was happy because I actually needed to write my exams and I needed to go through the next level. So after I'm done with my exams, I can go to uni.
I've been watching the news for a couple of months, trying to find out what are the updates on the reopening of the border. So when he eventually announced, it was a good feeling because we eventually could plan. I knew that, okay, on such and such a date, I'm able to go back home.
We need tourists. And, when you're sitting in Nairobi and you're watching, your whole country just disintegrate, it's not easy. But anyway, I'm home, and that's great.
The South African government has said travel restrictions will be reviewed every 2 weeks, and that countries which still have high COVID-19 infection rates will still be banned.
Nomsama Seku there at the Oliver Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg. And in Uganda, the borders have also been opened for land and air travel for the first time since March. Passengers coming into the country will still have to adhere to some strict guidelines. The BBC's Patience Atuaire sent this report from Kampala.
International flights have been arriving and taking off from Entebbe since early this morning, when most airlines, including the national carrier Uganda Airlines, resumed flights. The Aviation Authority has been advising outbound travelers to arrive at the airport at least 4 hours before scheduled departure. The Ministry of Health said in a statement on Wednesday that those arriving in Uganda will be required to present a negative COVID test taken at least 72 hours before their journey. Those who present a negative test will not be required to self-isolate. But should one arrive without a test certificate, they will be required to take a test and then be quarantined at their own cost while awaiting results. The borders are reopening at a time when Uganda is experiencing a sharp rise in coronavirus cases. In September, an average of 1,000 cases were recorded per week. As tourists and returning residents start to come in, it will take a lot of effort to make sure that the numbers do not rise any further. Although the government has been working to increase the bed capacity of isolation centers across the country, health workers who have spoken to the BBC worry that should numbers continue to rise, resources might become overstretched. Patience Atwere, BBC News, Kampala.
Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Botswana has extended its state of emergency for a further 6 months to combat the spread of COVID-19. President Mokgweetsu Masisi said a ban on public gatherings will remain and ordered face masks to be worn in all public places. However, schools have reopened and the sale of alcohol is allowed during limited hours. The country has so far recorded 3,172 cases, including 16 deaths. And more than 6 months after the closure of Burkina Faso schools to prevent the spread of COVID-19, students are returning for the start of the school and university year. The mayor of the capital city, Ouagadougou, and education ministry authorities attended the reopening of a primary school in the city, where pupils and teachers were given masks as part of coronavirus safety measures. $21 million went missing during the procurement of COVID-19 protections in Kenya. That's according to an audit report. The Auditor General, Natsi Gatangu, said the managers at the state body responsible for purchases, the Kenya Medical Supply Authority, or KEMSA, colluded with companies that were given contract. The government ordered an investigation following a public outcry after local media reported that COVID-19 donations from Chinese billionaire Jack Ma were stolen. KEMSA denies the claims. And the European Union has started legal proceedings against the UK after it refused to ditch plans to override sections of its Brexit divorce deal. An EU deadline for the government to remove sections of the Internal Market Bill, which the UK claims is necessary as a safety net to protect internal trade between parts of the UK, expired yesterday. The UK now has a month to respond to a letter of formal notice written by the European Commission head Ursula von der Leyen, or risk a court case at the European Court of Justice. Finally, the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has accused President Putin of being behind his poisoning with a Novichok nerve agent in August. In his first interview since being discharged from a German hospital, Mr. Navalny told Der Spiegel magazine that there was no other explanation for what had happened to him. The Kremlin rejects the findings of 3 Western laboratories that said he was poisoned by a Novichok agent. Nigeria is celebrating the 60th anniversary of its independence, but it comes at a difficult period in its history as it struggles with conflict and corruption. Nigeria gained independence from Britain on the 1st of October 1960. 7 years later, it suffered the brutal 3-year civil war after the east of the country, then known as Biafra, tried to secede. There was a series of coups and military governments before democracy returned in 1999. But problems persist with tensions between the North and the South, insurgencies, and perceived corruption surrounding the country's oil wealth. Well, President Muhammadu Buhari is appealing for unity as many celebrate the anniversary, but others on social media are using the hashtag Nigeria60 and useless. So what are the thoughts of one of the country's elder statesmen at the time? The BBC's Igbo service spoke to Chief Mabuzilike Amechi, the country's first minister for aviation, about his memories of independence and where the country is today.
I was one of the youngest people involved during the fight for Nigerian independence. I was still 18 years old. It was accidental. I went to the tap to fetch water with bucket. Then I saw a procession of people along New Market Road in Onitsha. A long procession, somewhere on horsebacks. I left my bucket at the tap where I went to fetch water and followed the crowd to know who they were. They entered Central Cinema Hall in New Market. I entered the hall with them and stood there. I saw some of them speaking English. There were Azikiwe Imudu, Herbert Macaulay, Mrs. Ramson Kuti, and other NCNC members. They were asking for Nigerian support to go and take power from the government. This was in the year 1948. They made a call to anyone interested in their movement, saying they should be coming to our meetings at a particular place. I started going for the meetings. That was how I became a Zikist. We then went from Zikist to NCNC, National Convention of Nigeria Citizens.
NCNC, National Convention of Nigerian Citizens.
Zikist movement is the youth radical wing, always wanted things to move fast.
Even in the governor,
They locked away a few of us. When we were released, we started having discussions with the British government.
We
started these meetings around 1950s at Lancaster House in London. We continued meeting there. Then came down to Lagos. After some time, we then agreed that Nigeria will become independent on the 1st of October 1960.
October 1960. So,
when the elections were done in 1959, that is the election that will birth the Nigerian independence. Azikiwe's party got 2.5 million votes across Nigeria.
With 2.5 million votes throughout Nigeria.
The problems in Nigeria all started because of the military coup. Take away the military coup, will there be problems in Nigeria? Corruption in Nigeria today all started after the coup. When we were in government, did you hear of stealing, looting, vandalization, corruption?
Vandalization. About corruption.
Azikiwe was premier of the Eastern region and president for 6 years. Look around Nigeria and see if he has houses anywhere. I was a minister for 6 years. Go and find out if I have a house around the country. But now, anyone that becomes a minister for 3 months will own half of Abuja. It is you people that are not mature to resist and fight against what is happening now. If you are a youth now, you have to know that when I was your age, I was fighting for the independence of Nigeria. Today, come out and fight against these people stealing from you. You people are the cowards of the country in Africa. Fight! Remove the corruption now. Remove the people stealing from you. Remove the people destroying your future. We have done our own in our time. Do your own in your own time.
That's Nigeria's first ever aviation minister, Chief Mbazulike Amechi. Now, if you watched the debate between President Trump and his Democrat rival Joe Biden 2 nights ago, and if you managed to hear anything above the shouting, you'll know that one issue they clashed over was the so-called Proud Boys. That's a white supremacist movement which Mr. Trump refused to condemn, choosing instead to focus his anger on left-wing demonstrators. Our North America correspondent Alim Makbour has been to meet members of both groups.
It's become the US capital of radicalism. Most American cities have seen some demonstrations this year, but here they haven't stopped. And it's become a huge election issue.
Well, this is what almost every night has looked like here in downtown Portland in the 4 months since the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, with hundreds of protesters on one side, law enforcement agents on the other, and there have been many flashpoints of violence.
Some feel over-aggression by the security forces has exacerbated tensions. But the White House says this isn't demonstrating about racial justice, just rioting by anarchists or Antifa.
A riot is the voice of the unheard. So if you don't want riots, maybe you should listen. It's not Antifa in the streets, it's the people in the streets. It's the people that are being pushed around, the people that don't have food, the people that can't pay their rent.
But it has led to loss of life. In late August, a large convoy of Trump supporters drove past the protesters in Portland, some firing paintballs at them. Later that day, one Trump supporter from a far-right group was shot dead. The left-wing activist who's suspected of killing him died in a police raid on his home. It's partly why the neo-fascist group, the Proud Boys, earlier this week decided to hold a rally in Portland. They'd predicted thousands would attend. In the end, it was a few hundred.
We're here to shut down this violence and bring awareness, national attention. Hopefully Donald Trump sees this, and he's already decreed this an anarchist city, which is great because it's true.
In the debate, when asked to condemn the actions of white supremacists, the president could only manage this.
What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
white like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not...
The Proud Boys have reveled in his response. Back in Portland at the same time as the Proud Boys gathering, an illustration of the totally different worlds on display in the US these days. A rally still focused on why so many black people are killed by the police.
They're trying to say that we're trying to destroy America and democracy, but they know that's garbage. They're just falling behind the rhetoric that dehumanizes us so that they can lower the value of our lives to justify committing acts of violence against us.
It's those at this rally who've been taken to the streets night after night. Many Americans support their efforts to bring about change, but for many others, these scenes are making them all the more determined to vote for Donald Trump. Aleem Maqbool, BBC News in Portland.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, we'll take you to Harlem in New York to find out why this little slice of the Big Apple has become known as Little Africa. I'm Peter Okwoche. Welcome back. Now, around the world, attitudes differ greatly when it comes to hearing female voices reciting from the Quran. For some, it's a sound that should be restricted to female-only spaces, such as women's prayer circles or Islamic lectures. For them, hearing a woman reading the Quran in public is sinful, including in some African countries. But in many cultures, it is encouraged, and there is growing appetite to bring more women into the field. The BBC's Sophia Smith-Gaylor reports.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Describe my tune as emotion, it's mixed with joy. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Anguish, a bit of sadness, but a bit of romance, all of it.
Nusayba has recited the Quran publicly since she was a child. Now she teaches those who wish to learn her unique style.
Honestly, it's completely changed my relationship with the Quran and how I feel when I recite it out loud. It's so important to have a beautiful tune, and also our Prophet, peace be upon him, recognized that and pushed for us to beautify the recitation of the Quran.
All Muslims around the world recite the Quran as part of prayer. But some become proficient reciters who perform in public. Worldwide, the majority of these reciters are male. In countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, female recitation is public and encouraged. In other places, women might be told not to recite in front of men, or might not live somewhere where women are platformed as reciters.
I thought it was so haram that a woman would recite the Quran where men could hear her. And Sheikh Mohib was like, Maryam, don't you know that Islamic history is filled with women reciters? Don't you know that our legacy is women reciting the Quran? Don't you know how many in our history, how many women have taught men the Quran? This is our history. This is Islamic legacy, women reciters.
On Instagram, a growing number of Muslim women like Mariam are posting to make female recitation more visible and openly discuss and question different cultural attitudes.
I launched the hashtag Female Reciters campaign to raise awareness of the rich public soundscape where women recite the divine texts of the Quran. Not a lot of women want to recite Quran because maybe they might not be professional reciters, they might feel shy, they might not feel confident. I want it to be just like a safe space for anyone to recite, whether they're a beginner or just learning or an expert. So it's like a safe space for everyone.
صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Sophia Smith-Gaylor, BBC News.
Now, they came from Senegal, Cameroon, Guinea, Gambia and Ghana to follow the American dream in New York. From Little Senegal to an open-air market, Harlem is now a thriving hub for the black diaspora in New York City. Our US correspondent Larry Madowo used to live nearby and has been back to speak to the diaspora community about how they were able to plant their flag in the Big Apple.
This is not Makola Market in Ghana or Owino Market in Uganda or any of the hundreds of markets you can find across the continent. This is Malcolm Shabazz Market in Harlem, in New York City. Let's talk to one of the vendors here, Seydou from Gambia.
We have a large African community in New York, so it's very important we have our place where we could show our culture stuff. And people come from all over the world looking for us. When they come here, they get what they're looking for.
I used to live in this neighborhood, so I have some familiarity with it, and also about its diversity. At my barbershop, the barber was African American, but in the salon section at the back, all the women braiding hair were French-speaking West Africans. Let me introduce you to some of the people here and their businesses.
I was working in a beauty supply for several years, and after they closed the beauty supply, I was looking for another spot, and from there, the COVID happened, and after the COVID, I just decided to, open my own business.
Harlem is the right place for market, and is the right place to start when you just come in New York, especially for what I'm doing for the bread.
There's a wide variety of African restaurants here in Harlem, and I'm here to speak to Mohammed Abdullah, who has been doing this for 40 years in New York City. I'm from Kenya, so I'm partial to pilau, but I'll settle for another African rice dish this time, jollof.
I'm feeling happy that African food now is in America. And many people have come to me, Mohammed, why can't you go and open it? I said to them, it's not easy. But they come and look and learn. They open it other places. But right now we are here and we're going to make it bigger in New York to the best way we could do it.
This indoor market used to have 15 vendors. One contracted coronavirus and died. A few more have dropped off because of the crisis. Let's speak to some of the 11 who are left here.
My name is Aminata. I sell art. I've been here for 10 years. Since we have the virus, things don't work. It's hard. Paying for the 2 storages here, the rent is expensive. I'm here to try to get our activity back on track.
The African entrepreneurs starting businesses here often have to navigate a maze of regulations and difficulty in accessing credit. But here in Harlem, some are still making it work and inspiring an entire generation. Larry Madowo, BBC News in New York City.
Very interesting stuff. And that's it here on Focus on Africa for today. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Goodbye.